Good evening and welcome to the Goodman Acker Show. I'm your host, Jordan Acker. Here we're alongside today Goodman Acker partner Tim Saloli. Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jordan. Good to be here.
And we have a really special guest today, our bike model, Jacob. Jacob, wave hello.
Hi.
So today, as part of our series about keeping your family safe here at Goodman Acker, we're going to show you the proper procedures for riding a bike. So, Jacob, if you wouldn't mind, take your bike right here in the middle of our studio. And the first thing we're going to show you is all the things that people do wrong when they ride a bike. So the first thing we'll notice, Tim, is that he's not wearing a helmet.
Correct.
This is obviously one of the biggest things that people forget to do when riding a bike, isn't that right?
Well, I would say it's probably the most important thing that you need to do is wear a helmet, because there's plenty of people that fall off their bikes and strike their head. And obviously, if you're not wearing a helmet, Jordan, you can obviously suffer some pretty significant injuries.
That's right. And we'll talk about some of those injuries a little bit later in the show. But the second thing he's doing wrong, of course, he's about to put his headphones in. Now, this is another dangerous distraction.
That's just as important as wearing a helmet is not having headphones on, because you cannot hear cars coming. You can't hear if a car is beeping their horn to warn you that they might, be coming in contact with you.
So now that we're talking about it, and he's sitting here and he's listening to music and doing all of those things, he's also texting while riding his bike.
Well, I would say that's just as bad as the other things that he is not doing with not wearing the helmet and having the headphones on. He's not paying attention.
Right.
And so he
exactly
can't obviously
right.
See if there is a car coming that might end up hitting him.
That's right. People say, oh, well, I can listen to music and ride a bike. It's extremely dangerous. It's really hard to do this correctly. And of course, Jacob should not be texting when he's riding that bike. So the third thing, and this is something that people forget both during the day and at night, is the color of clothes he's wearing.
Well, as you can see, Jacob is wearing all dark clothing. And that is significant, obviously, if you're going to be riding your bike later on during the evening when it's starting to get dark, because obviously if you're wearing dark clothing, people cannot see you riding your bike.
That's right. So as you look at him and you look on the bike, there's also no reflectors either. I mean, this is another big thing that Jacob needs to be doing.
Absolutely.
So Jacob. So now that Jacob's going to take his earbuds out so he can hear us again. So Jacob, what do you do when you're on a bike if you need to signal right or left?
I turn.
You just turn your bike? Do you use your hand?
No.
So you're supposed to put your hand up. If you're going left, put your hand to the right if you're going right. So that's another thing that he's not doing.
Absolutely.
And of course, one of the biggest things that we talk about is following the rules of the road when you're on your bike.
Correct.
So one of the big rules, and we'll start with this one, is you should always go with traffic.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if he's obviously not going with traffic, that causes a significant hazard, coupled with the fact that he's wearing dark clothing, his bike does not have any reflectors, and he's not wearing a helmet.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Correct.
But of course, we should remind people that if you're walking, you should be walking against traffic.
Absolutely.
So you can make sure that you see the cars coming towards you. What about following the street signs? What about following stop signs, traffic lights? What about that stuff? What should we be doing with that?
It's the same thing, whether you're on a bike or driving a car. You got to follow those signals, because obviously if somebody is driving a car and you're on a bike, they're going to assume that you're going to stop at that stop sign or you're going to stop at that traffic signal. And if you don't, I mean, you're going to put yourself in significant harm and risk.
That's absolutely right. And again, people forget that. They think that I'm on a bike, I'm on a motorcycle, I can weave in and out of traffic.
You can't. The same rules apply.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. So the same kinds of things you would say apply not just for a bike, but also for a motorcycle too?
No, absolutely. There's no difference. Well, the big difference is that you're going a lot faster on a motorcycle and can be more significantly injured if you're not following the rules of the road or not wearing a helmet or the things we talked about, dark clothing or reflectors on your motorcycle.
And what about if you're on something a little bit less powerful than a motorcycle, like a scooter or something like that? Yeah. People feel like they have the freedom to do whatever they want.
And they don't. Again, the same rules apply to anybody on a scooter.
That's great. And now when we come back from this commercial break, we're going to switch it up with Jacob a little bit, and he's going to do all the things absolutely right. Don't miss it. We'll be right back after these words on the Goodman Acker Show.
After the accident,
I needed action fast.
I couldn't afford second best.
There was only one opportunity to get this right.
I called Goodman Acker.
I got almost $350,000.
Insurance company told me I'd only get 10.
$75,000.
I got almost $250,000.
$600,000.
They started working for me.
Fast.
Fast.
They mean business.
Power.
Power.
Success.
the insurance company knew their name.
Goodman Acker.
لتضمن حقوقك كاملة اتصل اليوم بمكتب المحامي Goodman Acker.
And welcome back to the Goodman Acker Show. This show is, of course, brought to you by the law offices of Goodman Acker. If you've had a slip and fall, if you've had an auto accident, medical malpractice, or any other type of legal injury, give us a call, 248-483-5000. Lawyers are standing by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we're back with our episode about bike safety with Goodman Acker partner Tim Saloli. Tim, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Jordan. Good to be here.
And of course, Jacob, our bike model today. So if you notice, since the last commercial break, Jacob has changed a little bit. So let's go through some of the things that he's fixed. So first of all, Tim, you see that he's got a helmet on.
Well, he's got not only does he have a helmet, but he's got a helmet that actually fits his head.
That's right.
Which is important because if he has a helmet that's not fitted right, it will obviously block his vision from seeing the roads that he's riding his bike on.
Jacob, do us a favor. Pull down on the strap a little bit. So it's important. That helmet's a little bit too loose.
Yeah, it needs to be a little tighter, but it fits him perfect, and he's able to see, which is, I think, probably the most important
Absolutely,
thing.
absolutely. So Jacob, now I want you to take your hands and just move the helmet around a little bit. You see, it shouldn't be able to do that. It should fit snugly, but not too tight over the top of his head.
Absolutely.
So the next thing is this. So the biggest thing is he has no distractions here. There's no cell phone, there's no music, there's nothing. Yeah. It's important for him.
Well, it's absolutely important because he can pay attention to the road and the sidewalk that he's riding his bike on. He's not busy texting or listening to music and not paying attention.
It's very common, actually. In fact, did you know that nearly a quarter of all bike accidents are related to distractions like that?
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
It's actually 25.3% of bike accidents are related to using distractions, things like cell phones and texting. So let's talk a little bit further about the bike helmet stuff because this is important. So again, looking at the straps, Jacob, pull down on your bicycle helmet straps and look at the camera so they can see you. So you should see there that the straps shouldn't be twisted, they should go down straight, and they should rest easily right under his chin, just like they do. Again, Jacob, take your hand, put it on your top of your helmet, and rub it and run it back and forth from front to back. See, it should be not able to do that. This helmet's just a little bit too loose on him, but it's a pretty good fitting helmet.
Correct.
And the strap should then be pulled tight underneath your chin. Isn't that right? So the next thing, of course, that we'll notice is that he's got reflectors on this bike.
Well, if you notice on his bicycle, he's got reflectors not only on the tires, but on the back of his pedals and also under his seat, which is very important, obviously, for other vehicles to be able to see him on the sidewalk or a roadway, for example.
Right. So while we don't have it on there, he should also probably have a light of some sort too, right?
Well, there's a reflector on the front of the bike, and I don't know if you can see it that well from the camera angle, but there is a reflector on the front of his bike. But ideally, if you're going to be riding at night, there should be an actual light on the front of the bike. And also, I've seen some bicycles where they have lights on the back as well.
Right, right. It always seems like it's a better thing to have more lights rather than less. So
Absolutely.
Make sure cars can see you. And you'll notice the other big change he has is his shirt. Isn't that right?
Well, he's wearing a white shirt. In the previous segment, he was wearing a dark shirt, which obviously at night, most people who are driving vehicles are not going to be able to see him on his bike.
Right, right. And now that he's got that white shirt on, maybe it'll reflect a little bit more. And of course, we talked about this a little bit before, but the next most important thing is signaling on the bike. Drivers won't necessarily know which way you're going. So Jacob, we're going to do some demonstrations with you, okay? Okay, so raise your right arm, okay, and put it all the way out to the side, okay? So this is his way of telling cars that he's going to be turning right.
Correct. And, I think many of us have been in a position where when we're driving cars and we come up on somebody who's riding a bike, we cannot predict what they're going to do. So that's why it's absolutely important to put your arm out to the right if you're going to turn right. And Jacob, if you could, put that arm down and raise your other arm.
Yep. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Obviously, this tells us that he's going to turn left.
Right.
And so if we're obviously driving a car and we come up on Jacob, we know that he's going to go left, so we can stop our vehicle or slow down.
So now, Jacob, I want you to put your arm bent like this in a fist, okay? So that means that he's going to be going straight,
Correct.
okay? So if he shows that to you and you're in a car, that means you know that he's going directly ahead in the road.
Absolutely.
Now, Jacob, for the last one, open up your fist like that obviously means that he's going to be stopping.
Correct.
And these are really important signals, not just to know as someone who's riding a bike, but of course if you're driving a car as well, because most drivers don't actually know what these signals mean.
Correct.
And it's just sort of a biker going off in their own direction. And of course, we talked about this a little before. Jacob, you can put your arm down now. That you should make sure that you always follow the rules of the road.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously if you want to be safe, and especially with the summer months coming, where there's a lot of people who will be riding their bikes, yeah, it's a must.
Absolutely. And when we come back after these messages, we're going to talk to our traumatic brain injury expert about what happens when you don't follow these rules. Sometimes terrible brain injuries happen. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on the Goodman Acker Show.
After the accident,
I needed action fast.
I couldn't afford second best.
There was only one opportunity to get this right.
I called Goodman Acker.
I got almost $350,000.
Insurance company told me I'd only get 10.
75,000.
I got almost $250,000.
600,000.
They started working for me.
Fast.
Fast.
They mean business.
Power.
Power.
Success.
the insurance company knew their name.
Goodman Acker.
لتضمن حقوقك كاملة اتصل اليوم بمكتب المحامي Goodman Acker.
And welcome back to the third and final segment here on this week's episode of the Goodman Acker Show. And just a reminder, if you have any legal questions, give us a call. Lawyers are standing by 24 hours a day, 248-483-5000. So again, we're here with Goodman Acker partner Tim Sololi, and we're going to talk about what the unfortunate side of what happens if you're on a bike and you get struck by a vehicle. One of those things is, of course, traumatic brain injuries. And before we get started, I want to stress again something we talked about a little bit before about wearing a helmet while riding a bike. And I'll just want to read this because it's so important. Bicycle helmets are 85 to 88% effective in eliminating or reducing fatalities on a bike. That is so important to remember. And that remember that as a kid, you are more likely than an adult to get in a bicycle crash. So it's even more important that as your kids are riding a bike this summer, that you wear a helmet. So let's talk about it, Tim. What happens when you don't wear a helmet? Something that we call the TBI, or the traumatic brain injury.
Well, what happens is if you end up being struck by a vehicle, or maybe even falling off your bike, if you're not wearing a helmet and strike your head, you could suffer what's called a traumatic brain injury. And a traumatic brain injury is where your brain has actually suffered an injury which may manifest in several different symptoms. It could be headaches, it could be dizziness, you could feel nauseous, and then more significant symptoms such as memory loss, cognitive deficits where you have difficulty remembering not only things that you did yesterday or the day before, but also just basically putting your thoughts together.
So that would be like a concussion, for example?
That could be it could be a whole host of things. It could be a concussion, or what's often referred to as post-concussive syndrome, or it could be a full-blown traumatic brain injury where you cannot function, you can't do anything, essentially. You need somebody to supervise you on a daily basis.
And do these usually manifest themselves right away?
Well, they can manifest themselves right away, but more often than not, what we often see with traumatic brain injuries is that these symptoms will develop over time, and it could be days, it could be weeks, it could even be months, and oftentimes will become more significant as time goes on.
So suppose you have a client come in who's been hit by a car while on their bike, and you think that they might have suffered a traumatic brain injury. How do they get diagnosed? Who do they go see in order to figure out what's wrong with them?
Well, usually it'll start off from the very beginning. If they go to the emergency room in a hospital, they may be diagnosed there, just based upon the symptoms that they're presenting with, such as being forgetful, headaches, dizziness, being nauseous. But oftentimes they'll be referred to a specialist, such as a neurologist, who may do some type of testing, and they may do an MRI of the brain. If there's a significant traumatic brain injury, it may show up on an MRI of the brain in terms of a brain scan. There's also various electronic tests that can be performed, but oftentimes a traumatic brain injury is diagnosed by a physician, such as a neurologist, based upon the symptoms that somebody is suffering.
Okay, so let's talk about this. So it manifests itself right away or in the days and weeks afterwards. What kind of impact do you see in the long term from people suffering these sorts of injuries?
Well, a significant impact, especially if it's not being treated properly. It becomes worse and worse and worse over time. And oftentimes that person will not be able to function on a daily basis. They won't be able to work, won't be able to do household chores, and they'll need somebody to be there with them, whether it's supervision, whether it's specialized nursing care. We've even seen traumatic brain injury patients have to be hospitalized in facilities because their symptoms are so severe and their family just cannot take care of those people.
So we see this all the time. People don't really understand. If you're hit by a car on a bike in Michigan, you're entitled to no-fault benefits, right?
Correct. You're entitled to no-fault benefits, and that includes on payment of your medical benefits, medical expenses, I should say. Payment for individuals who are providing care and assistance to you, whether it's help cleaning your house or taking care of your household chores, or maybe if you have such significant symptoms that you need assistance with, somebody needs to supervise you because you're just not safe to be left alone. Or we have some traumatic brain injury patients who cannot even dress themselves.
So if someone's been hit by a bike, and suppose for a second that they have car insurance or they don't have car insurance, who should they call? How should they figure out who's going to pay for these no-fault benefits?
Well, oftentimes it is very difficult to maneuver through the insurance companies with making these type of claims. You need to call Goodman Acker. You need to contact a lawyer who is experienced in handling traumatic brain injuries, but more importantly, who is experienced in making sure that the proper paperwork is submitted to the proper insurance company. That is probably the most important thing.
And that's a big problem. You see people not submitting the correct paperwork to the right insurance company?
That's a huge problem. And when that doesn't happen, then those people are not getting the benefits they deserve for the injuries that they've suffered. And oftentimes these are injuries that nobody asked for.
Right.
This is usually somebody else's fault that has caused them to be in that situation. And if that paperwork is not properly submitted, those people are not going to get their benefits, and more importantly, are not going to get the proper treatment.
So if you have auto insurance and you're on the bike and you get hit by another car, it's going to be your auto insurance generally that will pay for those?
Absolutely. Some people may be confused by that. They may think, well, I wasn't driving my car when I got in this accident. But that doesn't matter because a vehicle was involved. And whether you're a pedestrian or on a bicycle, and you're struck by a vehicle, you have to make that claim through your own auto insurance.
Well, that's really interesting. And again, if you've been hit by an automobile, you're either on foot or you're on a bicycle, give us a call. There might be a way that we at Goodman Acker can help you get your medical bills paid, but also get your life taken care of, your household services, attendant care, things like that. Isn't that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this very special episode of the Goodman Acker Show. And again, Goodman Acker attorneys are standing by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 248-483-5000. Any of your legal questions can be answered by a lawyer at any time. I want to thank again Tim Sololi for joining us today.
Thank you, Jordan. Pleasure.
Tim, thanks again.
Pleasure to be here.
And of course, Jacob, thank you so much for being here and demonstrating your bicycle riding skills.
No problem.
You wave to the camera?
No problem.
Johnny Hamoud will be back next week. I'm Jordan Acker saying good night from all of us at the Goodman Acker Show.